Greetings and welcome to PinballHelp. Mike here. Today I've got a new pinball machine here in my workshop, my home workshop here, and I thought, because I've gotten a couple of inquiries online and I can't really always respond to all the comments and things people post, because a lot of times they ask things and it's not easy to diagnose somebody's game when you get just some ambiguous information on a comment. So I really can't do that, but it does prompt me to talk about certain things about pinball machines. And so today I'm going to talk about a kind of a common thing that I hear. As I hear, because my channel, there's all different kinds of people that end up finding this channel, including people that are not really familiar with pinball maintenance. They may have gotten a pinball machine, or their uncle gave them one, or they inherited one and they didn't know what to do with it, or they bought one in a storage thing or whatever. So I'm going to talk about certain scenarios and kind of help people that are just getting into this get a little bit of an idea. So this is a game that I picked up from a friend of mine. This is one of my Grail games, for those of you who can't tell. This is a Bally Paragon, and I'll probably do a video on this particular game and what condition it's in and all that. But like a first look. But right now I'm going to do a game as if I'm going to do a video as if this is a game your uncle gave you, or it was in his house, or you got it at a garage sale or something like that, right? So you picked up this game and you brought it home and you plugged it in and you turned it on and it lit up, but it wouldn't start a game, and you're like, I don't know what to do, what's wrong? That is surprisingly a common question that people ask. Now, those of us in the pinball community, that's not always the order that we would want to do things ideally. So I'm going to talk about that situation where you come across a pinball machine and you're like, I can't start a game on it. I don't know what's on, because I turned it on and it lit up, right? So I'm gonna do what normally you shouldn't do, just to demonstrate what people tend to do, right? So you get this game in. Now I have the back glass pulled off because I want to be able to show what's in the head, but imagine that's on there. Okay, so let's turn the game on and see what happens. Oh, look, it lights up. It lights up. You see that? The lights are all on, but there's nothing on the displays. So the game works, right? No. And if this is your first time getting a game, you probably shouldn't have done that. Now I'm doing it because I've looked over the game a little bit, and I know that I could safely do this, but sometimes you don't want to do this. If you get a game and you don't know where it's come from, you don't plug it in and turn it on. That's not what you really do, because there's so many wires and doohickeys and things bouncing around that you need to inspect the game before you ever apply power to it, because a lot of times you can find problems that as soon as you apply power become even bigger problems. So in a general sense, don't do this. Okay, so I turned it on, it won't start a game, none of the buttons work. The game lights up, so you think the game works, and a lot of sellers that don't know about pinball will say, it works, but it just won't start a game, you're just going to have to do something. Well, that doesn't tell you anything. This game technically is dead, DOA. Just because there's lights on doesn't mean that you have a game that is alive or that necessarily will ever work. In fact, a good bit of the brains of the game could actually be gone, and you wouldn't know it unless you looked. What you're seeing there, and let me shut some of these ambient lights off so it's a little bit more obvious, right? What you're seeing here is what's called the general illumination circuit. It's just, all this tells you when you turn a game on and you see these lights is that you've got 6.5 volts from the transformer. So there's a transformer in there, and there's wire from the transformer to some of the lights. That doesn't mean that anything else in the game is working. Now, what causes this? That's the thing. So if you get a game like this and you turn it on and it lights up, but it won't do anything else, you have a dead pinball machine. That means in the world of solid state games especially, it's DOA. It's not booting up. It's not starting. If it's an electromechanical game, it's more complicated than that. It's more of a switch issue then, but that is all predicated on the premise that the game is complete, that everything that's in the game is supposed to be in the game. So when you pick up a machine, your first thing you want to do is find out, is it complete? Does it have everything there? So I'm going to turn the power off on this, because that's all it's going to do. There's no sense keeping it lit up. And generally speaking, you don't want to apply power to a machine until you know what state it's in. So what happens when you get a game like this and you really don't know where you're at with it? You got to find that out. So you need to inspect the machine. These pinball machines have two basic areas. You have the cabinet here with the playfield on top. You have the back box. Now, depending upon what era the game is, and I'm going to talk mainly about electronic solid-state games that are from the late 70s onward. The earlier electromechanical games are going to be composed of mostly switches and relays, but it's the same, generally the same principles apply. You want to look inside where the stuff is, the inner components, and you want to see if you notice anything missing, and see if you notice anything disconnected or broken. 90% of the time with pinball machines, the problems can be spotted by just looking. And you don't have to be an expert in pinball to know, hey, there's something, there looks like something was screwed in here that's been removed, you know. So first off, if you've got one of these games in I like to use the Bally 35 games, early Bally and early Stern solid state games, because they made a ton of them and they still float around, and you can still get these for pretty good deals. And when they don't work, they're just in people's way and they want them out. So this is a good general platform. They made tens and tens of thousands of these, probably over 100,000 of these different games, probably 40 or 50 different titles with at least 3 to 7,000 made. So there's a lot of these games floating around under different names and different configurations. It's one of my favorite era of games, these early solid states, because they've got a lot of, they're fun to play, but they're not so complicated that you need to spend an evening studying the rule set. So, okay, you flip the game on and it doesn't come on. So what's the issue? Let's take a look. The first thing we want to do is we want to find the boards. So what we're going to do is we're going to open the head here, remove the back glass that kind of flips up and pulls out. You always want to be careful. And then we're going to open it up, and here's what we have on the inside. Let me, I don't have a camera person, so I'm going to have to do this. Let me see if I can figure out a way to hold that in place. Here's something. I'll just put that right there. Okay, there we go. So in this particular game, those are the boards right there. Upper left-hand corner is the MPU board, the main processing board. Upper right-hand corner is the power supply and driver board for the coils, the solenoids. The lower left is the lamp driver board, and the lower right is the sound card, I believe. And then all the way in the lower right, on this particular game, is the power supply, is the transformer, and then above it is the rectifier board. So let's go over each of these components. But generally speaking, when you get one of these early solid state games, the first thing you want to do is look for where the battery is. So let's talk about that. On this game, the battery would be right here. Now in this particular game, it's already been modified. The battery would be soldered onto the board, and quite often, if you're looking at one of these types of games that's dead, you might find a battery that's soldered onto here that has started to leak and it's damaged the board, and that's the reason why your game is not working. The main processing board has been damaged because the battery leaked. People would say acid, but it's actually not acid, it's a base, it's electrolyte, but it's similarly corrosive to acid. Comes out of these alkaline batteries and it creeps up all the traces there and it damages the board. And it can be repaired, but oftentimes it's easier to just replace this. But this is $275 on up to replace this board. So right off the bat, if you're buying a game and it's DOA, you got to factor that into the value and the price of the game. All right, it may cost me $300 just to even replace this board. So basically, let's go over the different components. This is going to be your main problem. You want to, if there's a battery on here, you want to cut it off immediately. You want to pull this board, and you want to immediately take a good look at it, try to neutralize the electrolyte, and salvage the board if possible. it may be too late depending upon the condition and how damaged it is. That's just something that's probably the subject of a whole video series in and of itself. And I have tons of videos where I have repaired these boards in various different ways, probably at least a dozen different videos on my channel, YouTube/PinballHelp, that talks about these. This is the Bally-35 or -18 MPU board. So that's the main thing. You want to take a look and see if you see any physical damage. Now in this case, this board is in pretty good shape, but you can still see some corrosion down around here. Somebody put a remote battery pack on here, and I can see from the battery pack that it's got corrosion too. So somebody put a remote battery pack in, put batteries in, did not replace the batteries. These batteries leaked. So that's not good. I'm a big fan of putting memory caps in these when they're replaced. But anyway, that's a whole nother story. So why is it not booting up? Well, before you even apply power to it, you want to just generally survey the machine, right? So what you want to do is you want to look and see if you see any broken wires, loose connections, any clear damage to the boards, etc. If you look here, everything looks relatively good. Then you want to check all the fuses, okay? So on this particular game, in this architecture, the fuses are in just a few places. Let me go over where they are. There's one fuse up in here, behind this thing. Most of the fuses are on this rectifier board right here. So you want to test these fuses. You can take a multimeter and use a continuity check on them. You can also just physically examine the fuses. Sometimes you'll see them if you see little burn marks. Now remember, if a fuse is blown, maybe the fuse was the weak point, or maybe something else in the game caused the fuse to blow. So don't always assume if you just replace the fuse, bam, the game is going to work again. Maybe it'll work immediately, maybe it'll work for 5 minutes, maybe it'll work forever. You don't know. But oftentimes, if a fuse blows, you want to find out what section that is, and you want to take a look at whatever section it was, because it could be a short somewhere else that caused the fuse to blow. So we're looking in the inside. You're looking for any kind of unusual things. In this case, we can see if the game is complete. If this board was missing, you'd see the brackets, you'd see a discoloration, you'd see a loose connector, and you'd be like, okay, this game, something's missing from it. So when you're surveying these games, that's the first thing you want to do. Make sure it's complete. Don't apply any power to it until you check everything. Maybe there's a bolt or a nut that was laying around somewhere that's, touching against something, so when you apply power, it suddenly shorts something out and causes more damage. You want to be super careful. So there you have it. We're looking here on this rectifier board, and there's fuses over here that all need to be checked. And more importantly, when you're checking the fuses, you want to make sure you're using the right fuse in the right spot. Now in this particular game, I can already tell, I think somebody put the wrong fuse in a particular part, and I'm going to have to double check that. But you'll go through and all the fuse things, and you can find these manuals online at ipdb.org for your game. If it's a Gottlieb game, you won't be able to download the manuals, but all the other manufacturers, you can find the manuals online, and they're freely available, and they'll talk about what fuses are in what spots and all that. So that's in the back box. Now let's talk about underneath the playfield. So before you apply power, the second thing you want to do is you want to take a look at what's going on down here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kick the ball out, again, remove the ball, and I'm going to lift the playfield. Once you get the glass off, by the way, to do that, you open this. There's a little thing down here that you pull out. You lift up the thing, and then you slide the glass out, and then you can lift up the playfield. So sometimes you need to pull the plunger back, and you lift it up. Okay, so now slide this out ever so carefully, and after we've removed the ball, then we lift this up. So let me do this real quick. Okay. And it'll sit up like that. Well, this one won't. Let me move it back a little bit further. There we go. Okay. Now in some games the power supply will be in the bottom here. That'll be where the fuses are in the transformer and that stuff to check. In this particular game they're not there. So now the second part of inspecting the machine is taking a look here at the underside of the playfield, checking all the coils. You want to just physically inspect everything, make sure nothing looks like it's burned up or melted. Make sure everything kind of moves smoothly, so you can tell there's no problems. You want to look at all these, the wires on the lugs of the coils. Make sure they're nice and snug, they're not loose. Look at that. Yeah, that's okay. You know, but sometimes you want to check all of that, and so you want to go through all the coils and see if you notice any problems. Now, if you really want to be thorough, the proper thing to do is to take your meter, set it to ohms, and then actually put the meter on each thing of the coil. So I'll set that down, and I'll touch either side of the coil, and then read the resistance across the coil. In this case, I'm getting 11.3 ohms, which is good. So you don't want to see anything less than about 3.4 ohms. It just depends on the type of coil and how big and how powerful it is. But you don't want to have any of these shorted. So you can go through, if you really want to be safe, and check the resistance on all the coils to make sure none of them are shorted out, because if they are shorted out and you turn the game on, it can blow fuses and damage transistors and other stuff in the rest of the game. So what you want to do is you want to just take a good look at the game and see if you notice any problems, anything wrong. You know, the flipper coils all look pretty good, nice and smooth. And in this case, mechanically, this game is in pretty good shape. I would probably work on those flippers a little bit more. I just got this game, so this is the first time I've actually looked at it. Look at this corrosion on the drop target bank. That's the lovely humidity we have here in Louisiana. That's nice, yeah. So, but I don't see any major problems. So why is my particular game not booting up? Well, that's when you get into the particular architecture. Now, I have no reason to think that any of the coils are bad, and I haven't checked them. But, again, that's what you want to do. So there you have it, basically the early tests you want to do when you pick a game up. You want to kind of make sure that's all good. And I can tell from looking at this game is complete. There doesn't appear to be any burned up coils. It won't boot up, so there's some kind of problem on the motherboard. And we can confirm that. And so in the next video, I'm going to go over continuing this process on stop kicking again. Continuing this process on this particular game, where we'll try to figure out what's going on. But in a general sense, this first video is basically, this is the things that you want to do when you first get a game and you want to try it. Before you even turn it on, you want to inspect it. Inspect all the coils, check all the fuses. Most importantly, make sure there's nothing odd going on. Make sure there's no screws or bolts or weird wires that could touch against something else, because you could go someplace and buy a game from somebody and it works great, and then you bring it home and unbeknownst to you, there was a loose wire in there that was not a problem when it was at that location, but now that you've moved it, this loose wire is touching some other section of the game, and when you apply power, zap, it fries an entire section of the game. So you just always want to make sure everything is secured and there on the game. And so thanks for watching. For more, visit pinballhelp.com. Also, be sure to subscribe on YouTube, YouTube/PinballHelp. And until next time, thanks for watching.